Incoming bracket!
I Care a Lot stars Rosamund Pike and is a Netflix film that came out in February. And I know I'm a little late to seeing this film, but I was very curious after hearing the very positive critic reaction and then the audiences clearly hating it. You go on Rotten Tomatoes, you'll see from critics that it's like an 81%, and then from audiences it's like a 23%. That's a huge gap, and usually that's the case with like art house films. So I was like, well, I don't think this is an art house film, so I'm definitely curious to see why there's this division. And right off the bat, I'm not going to give you guys a premise or anything. I'm just going to say stars Rosamund Pike and it tackles capitalism. That's all I'm going to say, because that's all I knew. Honestly, I didn't see a trailer. I didn't see anything. I didn't know anything about this movie other than I knew some people that liked it, some people that didn't like it. That's it. Right off the bat, Rosamund Pike, she killed it. She's a great actress. I've been a fan of hers for a long time, and she's great in this film. Peter Dinklage is also in this movie. He's really good as well. Liked the cinematography. It's very bright, very colorful, eye candy-esque. It's beautiful, honestly. It very much so is fitting in 4K. It looks really good. I like the score, too. It's very synth-heavy. It worked really, really well. I liked it a lot. It worked very well for a lot of different scenes. And it's also matched with the pacing. The pacing and the editing are also breakneck. This is definitely a film that's trying to keep your attention at all times. And then there are some twists and turns that did surprise me, and I thought were effective with what it was going for with tackling the messages and themes of, like I said, capitalism. Which, by the way, I think it did a good job of doing that. It's a dark comedy, but it's also like a thriller, and it's blending the two, and I think that it does so in a very interesting way. Like, I definitely got stuff out of this movie. I definitely thought it was interesting because, again, audience members really don't seem to like this movie. And I do know some critics that also didn't like this movie that I follow on YouTube. But I think it's kind of interesting because this is a film that, again, it's tackling capitalism, but it's doing so with unlikable characters, right? And so because it's unlikable characters, you as audience members aren't able to latch onto them. But I think that's kind of the point, because it's trying to showcase and break down capitalism in its form, because at its core, I mean, it's something where you have to be very cutthroat. And this is a lead character that's very cutthroat. It's just the difference is she is focused 100% on, obviously, her goal of money. Capitalism, baby. So I just find it kind of interesting that because these characters are unlikable, people aren't really able to appreciate everything else about this movie. I mean, it's a slick, stylish exercise in tackling messages and themes that I think more than ever are just fascinating. But again, it's not without its faults. I do think that this movie does have some issues. For one, I think that the term unbelievable or, oh, it wasn't plausible gets thrown around too much, but there's definitely some scenes that stretch the plausibility that's set up in the film. And I think that's important. That's an important difference that people are like, oh, that's not believable or that wasn't realistic. But it depends on if it was in the context of what was set up in this world. And I think that what was set up in this world, I think that sometimes this film kind of broke those realism boundaries. And don't get me wrong, there are some things that this movie is not trying to go for realism. It's trying to go for instead the shock and effect. But there was other scenarios where it just kind of was like, really? Like, example, not going to spoil anything, but there was one case where someone gets, into the water. They get basically in a car crash in the water, and they're underwater for a good while. It's almost like Lady in the Water with Paul Giamatti, like underwater for like a good while, and you're just kind of like, man, you would have been dead. So it's just kind of like one of those things where it's like, eh. But the other thing is that the ending, I feel mixed about. I think that there's something about it that works for me. It's definitely like a Chad ending, as my friends would call it, but it's also something that I just need to process a bit more, because there's something about it that I do kind of feel is a little off. Like, it's definitely set up at the beginning, but I do think that a little bit part of me is kind of saying, I don't know how much that worked. Definitely not for mainstream audiences, like in terms of like that ending. But it sounds pretentious, I know, but it's just one of those things where I'm trying to put myself in the mainstream audience shoes, and I'm just like, yeah, I wouldn't like this movie. It's unlikable characters. It's, got an ending that isn't really happy, although you could argue that it is, because it's with what happens, it's to a character that you don't like. But I don't know. There's just something about this movie that I just really endeared. It's really quite something when you see a movie that's well put together, and it never dulls you. And that's just something that I gotta give credit to this movie. In terms of other negatives, it's just nitpicks here and there, honestly. I think that sometimes the characters are a bit underwritten. I do think the main romance could have been built up a little bit more, but, it's all hearsay and airsay. It just, overall, I do also want to say, sorry, I'm a little off topic here, but I do also want to say that some of it is a bit predictable in like the second act. But again, hearsay naysay. Overall, I care a lot. I think it's enjoyable, definitely diverting, had my attention, and I do like the messages and themes. So overall, I care a lot. I'll be giving it 3.25 to 5-star rating, which goes like a hot sauce rating. It's a good old Frank's. So yeah, it's not amazing, but it definitely is diverting, and it's got an energy to it that I really dug. So guys, I care a lot. I care to hear your guys' thoughts. I'm very curious. Again, I know a lot of people don't like this movie, but you know what? Screw it. That's what opinions are for. So I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts in the comment section down below. And as always, don't forget subscription, notification bell, and I'll catch you guys later.